Hello and welcome to the Inside Elland Road podcast. I'm Chris O'Connor and I'm joined by Graham Smyth. Graham, just quickly, I just wanted to say a quick message. I'm recording from the west of Ireland, so if you're watching on YouTube, you can see a different background. Sadly, my grandfather passed away on the weekend, so I flew over on Friday and I managed to see him before the end. Quite an emotional time. He was basically like a parent to me growing up, and I think in the interview I did with you around the play or maybe the podcast, I mentioned the time when he lived in London, he was a QPR season ticket holder. And because I was born in Leeds, moved to London at 4, I was just obsessed with Leeds from birth. And he took me to a QPR game versus Leeds. And I was in the QPR end about 7, 8 years old, I think. And I turned up in a full Leeds kit. Like football boots, socks, the lot, and he never really lived that down at the QPR end. But I had so many memories watching Leeds with him as well. I remember being in a pub in Balladrine in Roscommon watching Tony Yeboah's goal versus Liverpool with him, and he would watch every single Leeds game. Whenever they were on telly, he would text me saying, "Were you there? Are you going?" He'd call me up, and he kind of became like, his team were always Queen's Park Rangers, but he became like a fan of Leeds because of me. And yeah, they were a bit like his second team. And actually, I don't know how, because it wasn't me who did it, but when I went to visit him, someone in the care home had put a Leeds United programme in with all the photos. So yeah, that was quite a nice touch. And he was a lovely, kind man, and he'll be much missed. And there'll be one less Leeds United watcher in the west of Ireland. And yeah, that's sad. And I actually needed Leeds to give me a bit of respite on the weekend. And it didn't happen because it doesn't always work like that. And actually, I only managed to watch the first half because I had to leave. We were heading back into the care home. And I remember the first half, I was actually feeling quite good. But football, unfortunately, is a game of two halves, which I think might actually be one of the talking points. But yeah, sorry, going for a little bit of a ramble at the start. But yeah, it's good to see you. And we can talk about a really positive run of fixtures and a positive time for Leeds.
Yeah, I'd love to say, happiness is just around the corner, Chris. I think what kind of your relationship with your grandfather kind of says that is football is so much about relationship, isn't it? Like it's about how we experience the sport with other people. I just don't think you can experience football in a vacuum. I don't think you can really live football if it's not for the way you experience it with people, the people that, particularly for those of us who grew up going to games, and those of us whose experience of football we've been fortunate enough to live it in stadiums, and it's all about who you go with and who you watch with, and it is funny how, like, family members can gravitate to a club that they would not have had any affinity for, because of youngsters or whatever. But I would still say that despite the heavy Bramall Lane leanings of one of my children, I haven't been unable to develop any form of affection for them whatsoever. And it remains incredibly funny to me whenever they do poorly, so that I can say to my 12-year-old, "Oh, Blades are doing well." And I hope that he grows up and as an adult and looks back on all the times that I mocked him when Sheffield United were losing. Sadly, didn't get the chance to this weekend when the Bamford and Cooper reunion took place, because they won that game. But this season has actually been a source of great merriment in our house, at least for me, not so much for him. But then again, he likes to mock whenever Leeds don't win. So despite me not being a kind of official Leeds United supporter, he still thinks it's hilarious to get the digs in, and he was able to this weekend. I don't want to say that I had the last laugh, because I don't think anyone is in a position to hear that right now. If Leeds were like second in the table and they just lost a game, I might have some room or scope to say, "Well, I did tell you they would lose 2-1." I just don't know that now is the time for me to gloat about my first correct prediction of the season. The reverse scud didn't work, did it?
Well done, Graham. What a sad little man. I did think of that when the result came in. No, that's not. If you're thinking of that as a silver lining, is not for me or for anyone listening. I don't
You're still
think.
thinking about the bad news, aren't you?
Still thinking about the bad news. Also, can I just reference one other thing that I think I sent to you last night? And I missed this. I saw this on the BBC thing. But apparently, if anyone has got this game recorded, on the 5th minute of injury time in the first half, Aston Villa attempted, if you listen to a previous episode, they attempted the O'Connor, the corner that I've been calling for all year. And they started everyone outside the box, they ran in. So if anyone has got footage of that, like, send that to me, because I'm passing it on to my lawyers. But yeah, and look, you're right. It is. Whenever I meet another Leeds fan, it's all there is kind of like something in our tribal DNA that's almost like you're meeting an extended family in some ways. So yeah, football is more than just a game. But yeah, it's a game we lost. How did you find it then, Graham? Because I only watched the first half, right? I am clouded by that, and I've seen the highlights and seen the analysis, and I was looking at the stats of the second half and that kind of momentum swing, and that was telling the story that we started the second half, as we have done a few times, on the back foot and allowed them back into it, and they'd made changes early, proactive. And we were perhaps too reactive. And maybe it's a case, I did think in the first half, I wonder if Leeds can keep this up for the whole game, because it was very physically intense. And I thought, was it tactically? Do you think he says, right, gather your breath for 20 minutes and hopefully don't concede? Or what would you put it down to?
Had it not been for the fact that you've been through such a traumatic personal experience, I would have made some joke about you deciding at halftime, it's not getting any better than this. I'm going to switch off and I'm going to live in my positive bubble and believe that Leeds United are not going to lose this game. No, I don't think you can say. It didn't feel to me like West Ham, where there seemed to be a deliberate decision to just sit back and contain and reserve energy, and some bizarrely let West Ham back into the game. I think you have to credit Aston Villa and the changes that Unai Emery made. And they're 1-0 down away from home. He's bringing on serious quality. They've got serious quality to bring on. He brought them on at halftime, nice and early, proactive, you would say. And they made a difference. Now, obviously, they were aided and abetted by Leeds United's nasty habit of failing to pick people up properly and switching off out of possession. Daniel Farke often says, we don't give away many big chances. You don't have to lose games in the Premier League. You only have to switch off once or twice in a game, and that's it, dead and buried. Because teams have players like Malin who will deliver a cross that just needs a touch. You got Morgan Rogers, who got himself 2 goals, making a case for an England place. You don't need to be really defensively all over the shop to lose in the Premier League. You just need to switch off a couple of times, and Leeds United did that. And it's such a shame, because the first half, that was exactly what we were asking for. Fight, competitive, direct when they had to be. Yeah, the goal, was scrappy and there was elements of fortune about it, but they all count, and they're 1-0 up, and they were good for it. They had moments in that first half where they had Aston Villa under real pressure. The pressing from the front, Villa were pretty uncomfortable with it when playing out from the back. And when they got a chance, Leeds, to go forward, they did so. And then, terrible time to concede. I mean, there's never really a good time to concede, but just after half-time, as Farke said, you're not tired. They've just switched off. And they don't have the quality to get themselves back into it, I think, against a team like Villa. Now, I say that, we have to caveat it with, Struijk has a good-headed chance, doesn't he, from a long-staff delivery. But I'm struggling to think of many other good chances in the second half where Leeds could have made a difference.
Well, there was the, and this is actually added another kind of wound into my bliss, that I checked my phone very briefly and it said 2-2, and I put my phone away, came and told my family, Leeds have equalised straight away. And I was living in that world for a while, contemplating, it's not a bad point, maybe we'll nick a winner. And then when I did check my phone, I found out that was not reality, and it was 2-1. But I guess that was also a moment where they could have scored. Perhaps if
Yeah,
Calvert-Lewin hadn't gone in
yeah,
off his hand or chest, it seemed like a good reaction.
yeah. Yeah, and I suppose we should make the point that Dan James came on, and I thought they looked more dangerous down the right with Dan James and Bogle. I thought Bogle had a good game. He was much better than he was against Forest. That's the thing about this game, is that there was improvement from individuals. Certain individuals played a lot better than they had in previous games. I thought Tanaka was really good. I thought Mecha was really good up top, way better than he was against Forest, so much more impactful, held the ball up a lot better, and really battled and really worked hard and really pressed. I thought Aronson had a great first half. Not great, a good first half. He had a good first half. Second half was subpar. Who else? Rodom's good. Stroik was good, only a couple of little moments. Got sent to the turf, didn't he, by Malin in the second half when he was 1v1 defending. I think most defenders are going to struggle 1v1 defending with a player like that. It's just a shame that they again, have not had the quality to reward a decent performance with a point or more.
Yeah, and I was watching Everton last night, who, I've gone back and kind of reassessed where I think this season is heading, and I definitely don't think Everton are in a relegation battle. I think those players they've got in forward areas, the way Dewsbury Hall just kind of took the pressure off them, got them out and got a goal, we just don't have that. And even the dribbling ability of Ndiaye, is it, and Grealish, we've got Okafor, and they were very resolute. They were able to sit in and absorb the pressure, and I just thought they looked like a very good team with 10 men, and it kind of shows the level of players they have in forward areas to make a difference. We just don't have at the moment on the field. I would argue we're not giving ourselves the best chance with some of the team selections, but I understand there's a counter argument Farke would make about what Aronson gives you in terms of defence. But I'm not having a go at Aronson because I think he was okay and he was good in the first half I watched, but I don't think he thinks himself as a right winger. I think he thinks himself as a kind of 8/10 playing in the centre of the park sort of player. And we do have Dan James, who I've always thought works quite well with Bogle defensively as well. Like he runs his socks off and he's not like a liability. So I didn't think that was the right decision when I saw the team sheet again. And it just doesn't give us the best chance of creating good chances of some of that pressure that we were putting on. So it's a change I think he needs to make from now on. And look, Aronson's a great asset to come on in games, particularly if you've got something to defend. But I really think Dan James starting is essential. It's tough, but you're right. I just don't think we have the quality in forward areas to turn that pressure into enough of an advantage. And at the moment, we're allowing too many soft goals, and that as a combination is just, it's not good enough. But the performance was better, and I think we should recognise that. It was better in the previous two games. It was Elland Road again, and we have performed well at Elland Road pretty much all season, but we aren't getting everything we deserve. So the pressure that was on Farke before the match, it has increased. I sometimes think our opinions are kind of pointless, right? Like, it doesn't really matter what I think. Yeah, what matters is what the 49ers think. And again, are you getting the same kind of indication that you were last week, that there's no signs of any movement on that front? And perhaps they are thinking of, let's get through the next few games, even if we are thinking about that, seeing how we're looking, seeing if we're still competitive, maybe there's some points to pick up. But it doesn't seem like there's anything imminent.
No, I mean, I think I haven't had any contradiction of the noises we were hearing after Forest. In my mind, it was going to take a beating at the hands of Villa for anything to happen prior to City. I think he would have had to, if they had not performed against Villa and had been beaten comprehensively as they were in the last couple of games, that might have done it, but I don't know that for certain. But I felt he needed a performance at the very least. He needed to show they were competitive. And they were. It's just that how many times can you say it? How many times can you say we were quite good, but not good enough? Because here's the challenge for Farke. We all know you don't have the individual quality. He must have said it 100 times this season already. If you know that's the case, and you know that you're only going to score 1, 2 at the most, you have to make them better defensively. You have to coach them to a defensive resolution to give themselves a protective shell so that they get clean sheets or they concede 1 at most, because then you have a chance of drawing or winning a game. If Leeds United concede 2 goals, unless you're playing Wolves, I just don't see a way where Leeds United can get a point. I don't see where 3 goals are coming from in a game. You've got Goodmanson, who can dribble the ball to the byline really, really well. He does it a couple of times a game. Okafor will beat a few men and get into good areas. There's nothing that comes at the end of it at the minute. On the right-hand side, Bogle hasn't really been at it as such this season in the same way. He started pretty well. He went off the boil a bit. I thought he was good against Villa. But again, it's end product. Aronson, 1 goal, 1 assist. You need more. You need more from a winger in the Premier League. And because of this paucity of goals and assists and creativity, it's really highlighting and exacerbating the defensive problems. You can't have both. Both equals relegation. So one of the two has to be sorted. And I don't see how he gets more goals out of this team. You know, yes, players could stand up a bit more and take their chances. And all right, he could play James. That's one thing he could do for certain. That I think would make them better offensively. He could play Gnonto. That would make them better offensively. Those are 2 things that he could do. Beyond that, I am struggling to see where the scope is. It's almost like they're at their ceiling a little bit. If the 49ers were thinking about making a change, then they'd have to be convinced that whoever's coming in can get a little bit more out of them offensively, but defensively can sort this team out. Because very few clean sheets. We saw them being compact and difficult to beat and defensively sound earlier in the season. It's a long time ago. A lot of goals have gone in since then. A lot of goals of a similar theme. And the problem doesn't seem to be going away. And you're just about to play some of the best attacking players on the planet in a run of 3 games. So it's going to ask a big question of the 49ers, this little spell. And I think we were right to categorize it as a block of 4. You know, that Farke has to try and get to the end of the block of 4 with his job status intact. And he's running the gauntlet. You know, first up, Manchester City. I know that you and maybe 1 or 2 other Leeds United fans in the universe might have a different view, but I think I would worry about how ugly it could get. I'd love them to prove me wrong. I'd love it to be a miracle at the Etihad in the likes of which we saw under Bielsa. I just find it very hard to see at the minute.
Did you see their result on the weekend, Graham? Man City's?
You know what tends to happen after a result like that?
In Leeds' case, a continuation of of those results. No, I'm saying that lightly. And can I make one thing? I want to say one thing that I remember watching that first half, and I did have a thought that I have seen teams with more quality put in nowhere near as much effort. Teams where you don't think they care, and I do really like the fact I think this team really care, and they have something about them which is kind of in the DNA of the city of Leeds and Leeds fans, in that they show a lot of fight, and that does matter to me. Like, even though we don't play how I'd love to see the game played, playing kind of beautiful football and goals. I understand that's a very rare kind of thing to get for a newly promoted side, and often it leads to very low points totals and going down with a whimper. But I remember sitting there thinking, look, I'm happy to support this team. I think they really are trying. I think they get it. I think the majority of that squad really care about it, and they buy into it, and the fans. And I like a lot of the individuals and characters. And I was kind of saying at half time, I was thinking, right, whatever happens to me, that performance, what I've seen there, I'm quite happy with it. I like the fight. I like I liked what I saw in terms of character and competitiveness, and I don't think we should take that for granted. A lot of people say, "Oh, I'd give 110% for Leeds," but I've just seen so many times squads and teams with loads of talent. In fact, my family QPR fans, I remember when they went down, they spent loads of money under Mark Hughes and Redknapp on lots of talented players who just were not bothered about the club at all and were not putting in much effort. And I would hate to get to that state. So there is something there that I like and that they've cultivated and that can be built upon. But I am aware I get a lot of criticism for being overly positive. And I listened to First World War podcasts recently, and there's a bit where they're saying all the generals and all the sides basically saying, don't worry, it's going to be over in a few months. We're going to steamroll the enemy. I feel like, oh my God, that's me, isn't it? That's me just going like, yeah, it's all going to be done by Christmas. It's fine. We're going to... but I do have to kind of look at the lay of the land now and say, look, we've got, a war on multiple fronts. It's not looking good. And the season, the aim is survival of relegation, 17th. That's it. And in the mix, I put us, Burnley, Wolves, West Ham, Fulham, Brentford, Sunderland. I think it's 3 from them. I'm not having Forest or Everton personally. I think they're too good. And I know some people might think Sunderland are already safe. But the thing which has given me hope, right, is African Cup of Nations. I think is going to play a huge factor this year. I think it starts December the 21st off the top of my head. So I'm sure players will be called out before then. You can miss up to 7 fixtures this year. And I went through those rivals, and Leeds are one of 3 teams who are losing no players. Brentford are losing 2 players, and Atara is probably their most notable one. I think he's a really good player. Burnley are losing 3 players, most notably Tuanzebe, who plays centre-back for them. I think he's a good player. Fulham are losing Iwobi and Bassi. They're losing 3 players. Sunderland are losing 7 players, and they've got 50 Premier League appearances already between the 7 of them. Siddiqui, Diarra, Adingra are already playing pretty well this year. West Ham are losing 2, Wan-Bissaka and Diouf, the fullbacks, so I thought were 2 of their best players against us. Wolves are losing 5, and they're already in big trouble anyway. So I do think, there are problems at both ends of the pitch. We do need to sign in January, but if we can kind of keep in touch in the next block of 5 to 6 and can get to December, and if we can be proactive and hit January running and maybe compound that advantage we've got with some of our rivals losing players, I still think this squad, and even with this manager, because there is a case to be careful what you wish for. And you've said this a number of times, that if you make the change, you get it wrong. It is actually curtains. And whatever you like about Farke, I can see a way that this team can get enough points, and I add in AFCON, that I still think the team can stay up. Could he go? Yeah. Could we get someone in who's better? Yes. Does he have things I disagree with? Yes. But I'm just not certain at the moment that the names I've seen linked with, either A, they're names I know and I'm not having, or B, the names I don't know enough about because I don't follow European football enough. So I'm not sure a change is the right thing. And I still think, although it's looking bleak, and it might look bleaker, that, the night is darkest before the dawn. And there's still a way that this team can stay up. But, I'm apologising maybe for telling my General Smyth that we were going to win the war and everything would be fine by Christmas. I'm now giving you an honest assessment. But we can still stay up with this team. I believe it.
I don't know. What I will say is that they are still playing for Daniel Farke. And I think you see that in a number of ways. You see it in the effort and the application. They were absolutely fighting on Saturday. They were fighting tooth and nail for territory, for 50-50s. Tanaka was throwing himself in the duels, which ironically ended in him being taken off before he got sent off. But also, it struck me, it was like 93 minutes or something on the clock. Leeds had the ball, and instead of just sending it, which is perhaps what I'd quite like them to have done, particularly with Dominic Calvert-Lewin on the field, they were passing it to get into a better position to try and fashion a chance and send the ball into the area, which I know is exactly what Daniel Farke wants them to do. He wants them to prepare their attacks, and he's coached them and drilled it into them that that's what they do. If they weren't still playing for Daniel Farke, they would be going off script, and they would be. I wouldn't necessarily say it'd be panic, but I think they would be doing things that were uncharacteristic of a Farke team, and I didn't see that as they were chasing the goal. They were still sticking to the plan. And that tells me that they're still playing for the manager and that he's still got the dressing room. However, it doesn't take a great deal in football for heads to drop and for a collective spirit to crumble. And that's not a question mark on the leadership of the team or the character of the players. It's just a fact that if you keep losing games in football, it becomes very, very hard to dig yourself out of that rut and to turn it around and to change things. Players become accustomed to the feeling of losing, and they go into games thinking, we're going to lose again today. And they'll never admit that. No one will ever hold their hands up and say, well, maybe when they go on that Under the Kosh podcast to slag off their manager in 15 years, they'll say, oh yeah, we went into every game knowing we were going to get stuffed. They're not going to admit it right now, but there's definitely a mental malaise that can set in when you lose a lot of games. And my concern is that I look at like Joe Rodon, right, playing his heart out, defending his heart out, getting in the way of shots, winning headers, making tackles. You can look at him and his jump perhaps for the free kick. Well, I think there's maybe a bit of blame to apportion elsewhere in that situation, but maybe he could have jumped higher, maybe he would have blocked it. But otherwise, I don't think you could have picked much fault with his performance. I don't think you could pick many faults in his performance this season. But he's coming off the pitch losing again, and he's not a player who can hide his disappointment. It's etched all over his face and his body language that he is feeling it, and he's going through it right now because Leeds are losing. For a player like him, it must be very demoralising when you're performing well, and there's others who performed well against Villa, but they didn't get a reward for performing well. And it can be really hard, I think, to pick up a group who start going through that. And this run of 3 games that's coming up, it's very possible that Leeds go, what would it be, 6 defeats on the bounce, 6 on the spin, and that's a significant portion of the season. It's a long stretch to go without a point, and I'm already at a very concerned stage. If that was the case, I don't think there would be much of an argument to keep Daniel Farke unless they played out their skins for 3 games, and you knew that if they played that way in the following 2 games, they were going to win them. That's the only way I could see him keeping his job.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. And it's the manner of the losses. If you think, like you said, that the players are human and that maybe that self-belief has started to erode so much because of if we do lose the next 3, then perhaps maybe you have to think like the only way to inject some new self-belief is to have kind of a new start, a new fresh face. And maybe that will be something that can kind of give them a bounce. But I'm not going to start writing off the next 3 games. Like, I know every neutral and a lot of Leeds fans will be thinking 0 points incoming, and I'm aware that's probably the betting favourite, right? 0 points. I'm not. Yeah, but these aren't the Man City, Chelsea, Liverpool as they have been in previous years. It isn't the Man City you get 100 points. It isn't Liverpool get 100 points. In fact, all 3 of them have shown flaws, and there are ways to get points against these teams. And I'm not going to throw in the towel and say that it's completely gone. My prediction is coming later, but I think there is a way to get points in this game. Yeah. Should we move on to Man City? You're gone.
Yeah, I think. We haven't addressed the pitch invasion. 61-year-old man has been issued with a police caution after entering the playing surface during the game. I initially thought, so I have to correct the record, I initially thought he'd come from the West Stand because it was so inconceivable to me that he could have come from anywhere else. It didn't even enter my mind that he could have walked any further than the West Stand without being detected. But he's come from N1, is it, in the cup? Anecdotally, I'm told that he said something to the tune of, "I'm off to tell Farke to make an effing sub," and then walked at a very leisurely pace, meandered, I would say, rather than walk. He wasn't striding with a great deal of purpose. He was just mooching down the sideline, and I spotted him as he went through the technical area because I thought, "Oh, who's that?" You know, in your mind, you think, "This isn't right." You know, like when Kiko Casilla would be 40 yards outside of his goal, and your brain would think, that's not where he's meant to be. I started to get that kind of thought, and I realized he had a scarf on. I was like, oh my, he's a supporter. And he got so close to the dugout that he would have been able, I think, to get a message to Farke had he raised his voice. But he was very quickly apprehended, spun on his heel, and bundled up the steps out of the West Stand and then arrested. I don't want to put any kind of significance on that action in terms of where the fans are, but it did come just after there'd been chants for Farke to make a sub. There'd been chants for Dan James. Willie Gnonto's name had rang out. I think when you take all of those things into consideration, this is the most Farke will ever have experienced at Leeds, an open revolt. You know, the fans are almost certainly now in open revolt, and we've seen 2 games in a row where there's been angry reactions from the crowd. There were boos at full time, and the cop sections of it chanted, "You don't know what you're doing," as he walked around with the players. I don't ever like to tell fans what they should think, right? Because they're fans, they have the most agency in this, and they've been watching Leeds a lot longer than I have in a lot of cases. And also they pay their money to go and watch. So I would never tell fans what to think. I thought the chants of "you don't know what you're doing" were a little bit harsh, given that the entire city turned out and cheered him when he masterminded promotion and 100 points in the championship just a few months ago. But I fully understand the anger, the worry and the concern and the frustration that the team selection isn't what people are kind of wanting to see. The style of football at times isn't what people are wanting to see. And the substitutions are coming far later than, and I sensed it that Villa were getting ahead of steam, and there were some Leeds players that looked tired, looked like they were flagging a bit, and it needed something. But he waited and he waited and he waited to the 70th minute. And you don't want someone to abandon their principles, right, in a bit of a storm, because no one will ever follow a leader like that. But at the same time, you have to be proactive. And I just don't, I feel like at times he's not. And I think that's massively playing into this divergence, the different direction that he's going in compared with the fan base. I feel like there's a parting of ways with the fans that's occurring right now. Not all of the fans. There are those fans that are still with him. But I feel like it's significant now.
Yeah, I think you're right. And it's tough because sometimes it's hard to see it objectively when you're a fan. Like I remember West Ham won a European trophy, was it like 2 seasons ago?
Yeah.
And then the season after, they were like apoplectic and wanted the manager gone. And sometimes the outside in, you're saying like, you just won a European like trophy under that manager. Like you think that they're maybe being a little bit over the top. But then when it's you're on the inside of it, like you're obviously emotionally connected. Obviously, it's quite a charged word at the moment, isn't it? I don't think it's a bad thing being an emotional fan. I would definitely class myself as one, and that's part of the reason why I follow a football team. That's sometimes hard to have that objective look, and I can imagine some neutrals looking at that performance going, "Oh, Leeds are really good, and that's a good Villa side. Walker Rodgers is a great player. Watkins is a good player." And that Leeds team, if they play like that, maybe they'll be okay. And maybe looking at some of the reaction, thinking, "Oh, it seems a bit unfair to boo that team off at full time." And I certainly feel like that performance didn't warrant that response. But I do take on board. I've felt quite a few games, you get that feeling like I'd make a sub here, and it doesn't come. I would say he did make subs in the West Ham game, and I felt like they made us worse. So it's not always the case that subs make you better, but sometimes you just think that Dan James needs to come on with a good half hour or 35 minutes, and it comes too late. I'd go back to your point about you can't say this team can score more goals. I think they can with, and I think that is the main change I'd make. Like Dan James and Nonto featuring more, I think could lead to a few more goals. And there's the only other way to play I could possibly think of is if you go back to the 4-2-3-1, but you literally just tell Ampadu and Stack maybe your job is only to sit and cover and defend, and you play Pirro off Calvert-Lewin, you play long direct, try and get out wide. There is other routes because it's not like what we're doing at the moment is keeping the goals out. But yeah, I didn't think it warranted boos. I was quite proud, but again, I'm clouded by only seeing the first half. I didn't see the second half. But it seemed like we finished quite strongly from what I was looking and following a little bit in the commentary. They were saying our Leeds are pushing here, like we have that Stroik chance. And, character-wise, again, it's not like we went out with a whimper.
No, they did. They did push and they did fight, and that was reflected as well. It wasn't like you had 33,000 people stood there booing the team off. A lot of people left.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, that's fair. Yeah,
a lot of people left quite quickly. It's miserable, horrible, miserable day. You definitely want to get home and out of that. But also, a lot of people stayed and applauded. The West Stand applauded. It was a mixed response elsewhere. So that has to be reflected as well, that it wasn't just wholesale boos. And
people are entitled to boo. Like we have
100%.
Lost 5 and 6, and people love their football club, and it's looking bad. So I'm not saying you shouldn't. I'm saying I wouldn't have on the basis of that performance. I don't really boo anyway, my own team, but yeah, I just didn't think it warranted then. But you are entitled to it.
I don't know that I could bring myself to boo, not because I'm thinking, the poor players, these poor lovely lads, because I think it's a bit cartoonish, like for a grown man to boo. A colleague of mine sent me a very funny message on Sunday saying, "Just been practicing my booing in the mirror," which made me laugh a lot. But I just don't think I could bring myself to do it. But I can bring myself to be very. It doesn't take a lot for patience to go when you're watching your team and you're thinking this is what needs to happen, and that very thing doesn't happen. That's why I sent a tweet at halftime in a game this season saying do it at halftime, wanting the manager sacked, because I was absolutely fed up. And maybe this is a talking point for us this week, is that it took 49ers an age to sack Russell Martin, right? An age to admit, actually, we got this wrong. Let's change it. And I didn't give them a great deal of credit for coming to that decision, because I felt they came to that decision very, very late. But there's also been a huge groundswell of dissatisfaction at decision makers at Ibrox, wanting them to go as well, Thirlwell and Stewart. And I didn't see it coming. Now, I can't say that I particularly have my ear to the ground at Ibrox, and I kind of know the ins and outs, and I know when stuff is coming. But it took me by surprise that 49ers have got rid of key decision makers and kind of big figures in the club who've overseen a lot of huge decisions, even until recently. One of them was given an interview with Rangers TV last week, and yet they've gone. They've parted company with them. And I don't know, is it a ruthlessness that I didn't see coming, or the timing of it? I don't know. Something about it just jarred me a little bit, and thought, this is maybe just an interesting thing to note from a Leeds United point of view, that just because there's this, we have this kind of sense or assumption that they're not going to act for a certain amount of time, or they're only going to take certain action. I don't think we can absolutely second guess them, because I didn't see that coming at all at Rangers.
Yeah, and they are new to this, right, in terms of not sport, but in terms of football in Scotland and England. So there will be an element of perhaps learning on the job and being a bit caught off guard by maybe the level of day-to-day scrutiny that happens at football clubs. And maybe this is a sign that they are changing tact. I don't know. But yeah, it was interesting. I did see the headlines, and a mate sent it to me going, "Oh, look at the 49ers are doing up in Scotland." And yeah, there's no doubt that both the clubs they own, they are being challenged. And obviously they're different cases, right? Rangers usually challenging at the top of the table, and Leeds are now in the very different scenario of trying to stay up. But it is interesting. It's interesting to draw the analogies, and as you said last time, there are different decision makers at both clubs, but ultimately it's the same head at both of them. Let's talk about Man City then, because it is not an ideal fixture at this time by any means, and they are. It's no. I'm not going to get any analyst points for saying they are a very good side with a good manager, and any neutral. Pretty much every single Leeds fan, barring myself, maybe just myself actually that I know, would probably be saying that this is about as, if you're doing the putting your accumulators on, or what was it, the pools back in the day, this has kind of got home win written all over it. If there is a route to points, right, it is. I would say in looking at them, right, look, Newcastle caused them quite a lot of problems. I saw they had quite a few chances aside from the goals. And they've changed a bit this year, Man City. They are going a little bit more direct. And they seem to have, I saw a few stills from the game, and they had that kind of like that 2-3-5, it looked like. They had 5 players with the fullbacks pushed right up and sometimes inverting with the wingers. And there is huge gaps to get them out wide. And I think the way to this point, you've got to be really compact. You've got to be really deep. And if you turn over the ball at any point, I think you've got to get it out wide and be really quick and direct with attacks. And I think Dan James would have to play this fixture for me. I think you have to have some sort of outlet to relieve the pressure. And I like Goodmanson and Okafor on the left defensively. There are quite big question marks about the problems Man City pose on that side, and that would definitely worry me. But if you can get a foothold in the game, make it ugly, the 3 midfielders will probably start with. I don't know what Stack's concussion situation is, but I presume because of the nature of the fixture, he would likely start over Tanaka. But again, I'm a huge fan of Tanaka, and I think he's another route to maybe making us looking better in the final third. But in this fixture, I think it's about, they've not been great at set pieces either, actually, Man City. So I think it's about compact, sit back, soaking it up, and whenever you turn over the ball, if you can get it out wide, there is space. There will be space there, and you've got to try and maybe get something on that on the break. That's my kind of like, that's the case and the route to points as I see it. And they're not the Man City of old who you're looking at it and you're thinking, God, we do well to even keep it to 3. They're not the same when Rodri doesn't play. They're not the same defensively at the moment. They are kind of teething into a new system. So if you can frustrate them, they play again this week by Leverkusen, I think it is. So then maybe there'll be changes, maybe there'll be a little bit of tiredness. It's not impossible is what I'm saying. And like, I'm also clouded by the kind of Ireland stuff recently. And actually, just to jump back to what I said at the start, my granddad was in hospital for the Ireland games. And the last thing he would have seen was that they'd blown it against Armenia. So I managed to show him Troy Parrott's goal. And I got his glasses on to him. And so that's a nice moment. And that just reminded me that I'm never writing off a football team when I support them. I'm always going to go from the point of view of, right, how can we get points in this game? And maybe it makes me deluded. It does make me deluded. If I think we can get points at Man City, which I do, I am by definition a bit deluded.
Yeah, but I think that is the reason why we all go to football. The reason why you get up on a match day and go is that you think something can happen. You know, you're hoping and praying. And sometimes you're thinking there's very little chance of anything happening today, but you just never, ever know. I mean, Leeds United beat Manchester City, excuse me, at the Etihad with 10 men for more than 45 minutes of football under Bielsa. That is as close to a sporting miracle as I think you'll ever find, because that Manchester City team was absolutely sensational and they had an extra man, and yet somehow Leeds pulled it out the bag. So you just never, ever know. However, I look at a Leeds United central defence that is struggling. Rodon's playing very well, but alongside him, there's been some wobbly bits, and there's this problem between centre back and defensive midfield. And yeah, I worry about Haaland and what he might do.
Yeah, look, that is that's a worry, right? And the form, obviously, he misfired in the last game, but the form he's in this season is ominous, and it makes me wonder who is the best centre back partnership in order to combat that, and whether you just go something. Maybe you change it all up and go five at the back, maybe 5-3-2, and you play Okafor or someone off of Calvert Lewin. But then I think I don't want to lose the threat we could pose out wide, and I know Goodmanson and Bogle could still pose that, but yeah, I felt like Beal when we signed him, and even the last two games, I think about putting him in. This is one of the fixtures I had an eye on. I thought like maybe this is he would suit this game better than perhaps Struijk. So I don't know. I don't know again if he flip flops again and bring Beal back in. I'm not sure. I personally, I think I would because of how I expect this game to go. Yeah, but no one is going to be surprised if he gets on the score sheet at least twice in this game. He is just such a good player. I actually wrote an article about 3 years ago, I think it was, asking him to sign for Leeds before he went to Man City, which shows, again, my kind of optimism and hope when it comes to football.
Naivety.
You could call it that. You could call it that. Yeah, so it's an ominous fixture, more so than the other two, because I think the home fixtures against Liverpool, how they look at the moment, and Chelsea, I'm not completely against. I'm not against points in this game, but I think the way we've performed at home this year is even less optimistic fans than me would think. We could get at these teams and possibly get something, and we shouldn't be scared of them. This fixture is the more ominous of the three. Yeah. What are your thoughts on the game elsewhere, or you want to jump straight in with a prediction and just get it done like a plaster?
Yeah, I do worry about Struijk perhaps against Haaland. I wonder if you try and combat a monster with a monster with Beal. I would worry a little bit about Struijk getting kind of bumped and turned, and then Haaland getting away from him. I know Rodon's there as well. Maybe they'll pit Rodon up against him because of how good he is in the air. I like Struijk, and I know that people will say, "Oh, you were calling for him to come out the team." I still felt like he was wobbly at that point when he came out. I do really like what he adds in the build-up for Leeds. I don't know how much build-up Leeds will have in this game, or how much build-up will play a part. Maybe it just needs to be back to front. Perry definitely needs work on his kicking. It feels to me, I said this to someone on Sunday, for a huge giant of a man, and he is a colossal man, I feel like he should be able to kick the ball out over the bar at the far end from a goal kick. Like, I feel like he should be able to, when he's at the cop end, he should be able to put it in the south stand. And I don't feel like he's doing that. I don't feel like he's kind of, I don't know, kicking the ball far enough off the deck. His kicking definitely needs work, but yeah, I think going direct, being very physical, getting at them when they have the ball. I mean, they're going to have to, aren't they? Leeds are going to have to press brilliantly. They're going to have to press with such a great organisation and precision, but also with the utmost physical aggression within, or slightly within, the rules of the laws of the game, because you have to leave something on them. You have to make bodily contact if you want to stop these players from getting it to their creatives. And if you want to stop their creatives from dribbling, you've got to make physical contact and make it quickly, because otherwise they'll tear you apart. But you are right. This is not the best Manchester City have been under Pep, but they are still under Pep, and they still have undoubted, unbelievable quality. So you cannot switch off at any stage in this game. You cannot let them take a free kick and then put no pressure on the ball and watch a man drift into the area to take a pass inside, or let somebody crash the area unmarked. Those things cannot take place. So this week, whatever Farke can do to absolutely drill that out of his players, to get to the root cause of that issue and try and come up with a fix. Maybe it's formation, maybe it's three at the back, I don't know. I'm not a football coach and I'm not being paid to sort that problem. So I have enough problems of my own to try and sort. I'm not going to try and solve Leeds United's. But he has got problems to solve. And when your job status is being questioned as openly as it is, then you really can't afford for an issue to carry on cropping up time and time again. You have to show that you're equal to the problem with a solution. So that's on him this week, definitely.
Yeah, and in terms of pressing, I think the key is to press in the right areas as well. You don't want to be constantly pressing high up the pitch against a team like this, but there will be certain areas where hopefully there'll be kind of triggers where you think, right, this is a good point to press, because if we do win the ball here and we can get it out wide, we can hurt them because their fullback's already pushed up. But in a lot of ways, I guess, hopefully the job of the centre midfield, that midfield three, should be a little bit clearer. I don't want many of them going forward at all much in the game. I want them sitting and protecting in front, and like that's it. That's that's the wall. And you're right, we can't see people drifting in and cutbacks, and that's that same goal we've seen a few times. I have to see an improvement there. Okay, then, Graham, let's hear your prediction with your sad little Man City win.
Manchester City 3, Leeds United 1.
Okay. Look, I've taken a lot of stick for constantly predicting Leeds to win, and look, I've taken that on board. It's not easy for me to say this, but I'm going to say it's going to be a spirited performance, but it's going to be Man City 2, Leeds United 3.
You cannot, for the sake of the podcast credibility, you cannot believe that they can score three of your English goals at Manchester City.
I'm joking. Look, I'm going to predict. I'm going to predict a. No, I'm clouded by Ireland. I'm saying we do something special, and I need it at the moment, so I can't not predict us. I want to live in hope. I'm going to say an unbelievable, resolute defensive performance, and we nick something, and it's 1-0.
Wow, a clean sheet at Manchester City. I mean, you talk about like turning points in a season. You could quite literally base the rest of the season on that as a turning point, if that was to be the case. You know, if Leeds United beat Manchester City 1-0, then you go into the game against Liverpool and the players are on cloud nine, they're walking 10 feet tall. You probably take that momentum and carry it with you all the way to the finish line. But I don't know if I'm too dead inside after too long in this industry. Like I feel like a lot of my spark has been taken and snuffed out. So I just don't know if I can bring myself to see it. I'd love to see it, but I took enormous satisfaction from the victory when Dallas got his 2 goals. Not least because we were sat behind the Man City bench, and I've mentioned before that they were like Mendy and Walker and someone else. They were like hyenas, like just ridiculous babyish noises coming from the Man City bench as their team pressed for a winner that they felt absolutely certain was going to come. And the silence, I've never heard a silence as gratifying as the silence from the Manchester City bench when Dallas ran through and scored that goal. I mean, and what's interesting there as well is that to get that result, Marcelo Bielsa had to depart entirely from his style because they were a man down, and they conceded all the territory. They just formed like 2 banks of burgundy shirts and let John Stones carry the ball. If John Stones had the ball, they said, let him carry it. They let him carry it up to the edge of the box. And I've always wondered, like, had he spent so much time on the ball running forward that he didn't have it in his legs to get back at Dallas for that winner? Was it the ultimate rope-a-dope in sport ever that Leeds, soaked up, like Homer Simpson when he becomes a boxer and he just takes all the punishment and then he leans on the opponent and they're absolutely knackered and they fall down? That's what it felt like to me. Maybe Farke is going to come up with something completely masterful that nobody sees coming. A sucker punch, if you will, that catches Pep and catches Man City. It's going to take something like that, I think, or a Man City player sent off early on, or some anomaly will need to occur.
Yeah, look, and I'm caveating this with, look, gone to my head, probably you would have to say something like Man City 3, Leeds 0, right? That's the gun to your head, what most neutrals would say, but I haven't got a gun to my head, thankfully. And I'm a fan, so I'm going to be thinking about the ways. I'm going with my heart, and I'm sticking with that prediction. And yeah, as soon as you said clean sheet, I did think, well, that is quite a big shout, actually, Chris, even by your standards.
This might be your most egregious outburst of positivity of all time.
I think I've now lost everyone who was on my side. But part of me also, maybe I'm thinking in the screenwriting terms that like this act 2 is not being fun at all, and it's getting a little bit like from a writing perspective. Like if you're watching this, you're like, this is a bit much. I'm switching over.
It's like
our narrative needs something.
It's like in The Walking Dead when I don't know if you watched it, but there's a bad guy called Negan, and he just like has a succession of victories over the good guys, but not only victories, like he quite literally pulverizes them, pulverizes their skulls, and it gets to a point where you think, God, it's a bit much for even me now and my black soul. I need the good guys to do something good now. That's what it feels like a little bit at the minute for Leeds United.
Yeah, I've read the graphic novels, but I haven't seen the show. I don't know. That's me trying to. I don't know if that's a bit of a condescending thing to say. So didn't mean it that way.
Very much so.
But yeah, it's you know what? One thing I just want to caveat as well before we finish, that we were a bit down on international football, and I regret that now. I think that was a mistake. Like seeing the Scotland and Ireland, and like it did remind me that there is kind of the purest form of football, and that I think we just get a bit jaded with all the friendlies, and they're constantly rejigging these formats and nation leagues and stuff. But at its essence, there is something beautiful about the way you play for your country and some of the moments it can create. So I'd like to retract that and say I was wrong. And that's inspired me to predict a Leeds win this week. So, yeah, I'm expecting to be jumping in next week, Graham, and to be, again, feeling annoyed at your prediction. But no, I'm keeping up. I'm sticking to the hope. I'm living in hope. Right. I think that's it for today. Anything else from you?
No, I would just say that nothing would please me more than to log on next week and for your smug face to appear on the screen and to have hundreds in the YouTube comments and on Twitter saying, Chris, we're ever so sorry. We were wrong. You were right all along. And then, then begins the cult of Chris O'Connor, and you could probably monetize that, some sort of positivity guru.
We can but dream. Okay. Thanks, everyone. I hope you have a good week, and we'll check in again next week. See you all soon.
Bye-bye.